Welcome to Founded on Purpose, the show where we get to know the people working to align business and impact, profit and purpose. I'm your host, Katie McBratney. In each episode, we welcome a founder, investor, or ecosystem builder to answer the same set of questions. As you listeners know, while the questions are the same, the answers unlock some wildly beautiful and I would say better conversations. And better is the name of the game with today's guest. I am so excited to welcome Merav Goldman, the co-founder and CEO of All Better Co., to the pod. This is a company that's reimagining first aid and personal care with skin-first remedies that are better for our bodies and for the planet. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
The word better is just so I feel like we should have a counter for how many times we say it today because it might break the internet. But I feel like it's perfect timing because as we enter 2025, we know that there's a lot we can do better.
Sure. A lot.
We got to start and focus on what we can do, right? It takes all of us doing it. And with that said, in one word, what would you say your purpose is?
Progress.
Tell us more.
I think this idea of doing better, right? I think that's really what it's about. We talk a lot about progress over perfection, and this idea that as long as we are generally moving in a positive direction, it might not be in a straight line, but the momentum that we're using is in that direction, that's kind of the best we could aspire to, because we know success and improvement isn't linear, isn't a straight line, right? Like some say I think they did mention this before, this idea of like a curved line is more stable than a straight line sometimes. Like the walls, you heard that about the brick walls in the UK, that you see barriers that they are curved rather than straight, because curved brick walls are more stable than straight brick walls. And so I think that's kind of the visual I have in my mind. And I think that's what Stacey and I think about. It's one of our common points, even before we started the company, when we talked about like our approach to parenting and our approach to our own lives, this idea that as long as we are aiming towards progress, then we're on the right path.
Kind of counter to the played out startup mantra of move fast and break things, try to make that straight line as straight and as steep as possible. How do you balance building for progress and allowing and encouraging those curved lines where it makes sense with momentum, right? Like how do you throttle the pace and the progress, not over-indexing for straight linear growth, but not over-indexing on the long and winding road where it doesn't serve progress?
Well, I think the move fast and break things is a tech approach, not necessarily a CPG approach, first of all. And I think that approach is also geared towards an exit for an exit's sake. And it's missing the heart, right? It was about getting there quick and casting the check and then checking out. And what we're doing has never been about that. And so I think we're looking at this idea of creating something that is thoughtful and is there for sustained growth and impact rather than for quick growth and exit. Now, we still want the exit and we still want the growth and we still want the impact financially, but we also want the impact in all the other ways, right? Of making a positive impact for individuals and creating products that are useful and they're not for the sake of just creating more.
Yeah, creating another brand just to take up more shelf space, or for anybody who also has a cluttered first aid cabinet, more cluttered first aid cabinet space, which is such an interesting place to think about where innovation has and hasn't been, right? Like, I think you've said it multiple times. It's like, go check that tube of Neosporin or whatever your antibacterial ointment of choice is, because it's probably expired and you've had it in there for forever and you haven't probably thought about what you're buying. You just buy what you know. And even with even at the level of which products you all are tackling and in what order and with what ingredients and what formulation and what application product, like you're thinking, there's this thoughtfulness woven into the fundamentals of your business, not just the philosophies, that I think really stands out. But it also seems like it aligns with how you are living your whole life.
Well, I think we talk a lot about being moms. And I think in general, people who choose to become parents or become parents, you have no choice in most cases but to kind of make this mental shift, because all of a sudden there's something in most cases you believe more valuable than yourself that you need to care for. And so the act of care becomes much more thoughtful and your awareness is heightened because you see this like helpless thing that nobody but you is responsible for. And the like gut wrenching terror that comes along with that as they're small.
Oh, yeah.
But it changes your perspective in thinking like, I need to think in advance. I need to think for greater good of how I'm going to take care of this being. And I think that way of thinking is so fully ingrained into our business. And I mean, the caring of those humans was the impetus for the business in general, because Stacey and I both had kids that were suffering and were uncomfortable. And in some cases, like our own suffering and discomfort is much more tolerable than that of our children's, because we can do something directly to manage our discomfort, whereas we don't know whether we can do something for somebody else's discomfort. And so that being kind of the driving force for it all has kind of led its way, for lack of another term, into everything, in thinking about how do we do this most efficiently, most comfortably for ourselves as the helper, but then also for the individual being helped. And so it's kind of in the DNA of everything that we're doing.
It's like a framework of care towards the business as well, because as being a founder is a lot like being a parent, a lot different. There's fewer diapers typically as a founder, but who knows?
Depends on the business, I guess.
Right? I'm not here to judge anyone's product or business model. But at the same time, it's like as a founder, you can do the most. You have the most control over how you can help your customers, your team, your co-founders, your family. Like you are in a different seat that's very similar to being a parent, and approaching it from a level of care versus a level of like profit over everything, which is why, of course, you're like a dream guest for this show.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. And for folks who are watching and not just listening, but also might recognize Merav, her and her co-founder Stacey were on the summer season of the Roku show Side Hustlers. So you can learn more about their journey and see a good snapshot into that chunk and season of their lives there. If you're like, where can I get more? We've got you covered. I'm curious, as we talk about progress, like that was a milestone, the show itself. There have been a lot of milestones along your journey, though. What has been a recent win? Because being a founder, a lot of it is hard, and it's easy to focus on like when you're in the down cycle, it feels like the depths of despair. But when you get those wins, small or big, they all count.
And, it's hard for us to celebrate our small wins as we go because we're so in the trenches of the day-to-day of keeping it going. To a certain extent, as a business, as a small business that was founded during COVID, I would say our mere existence, continued existence is a big success. A lot has happened in the lifespan of this business already, unrelated to the business itself, but just in the world. And so we've heard multiple times the fact that we're still around, We're still putting product out in the world. We're still growing slow and steady. That in and of itself is a huge win. And it's an indication of kind of our ability as founders, as entrepreneurs, as business people to know that we've been able to sustain ourselves without, getting into massive amounts of debt or giving away most of the company or all of these other things.
Or
so
burning
that
yourselves out or
Right.
damaging your co-founder or family relationships.
Absolutely. So I feel like that's like a large scale win and continued kind of success that we see. But I think in addition to that, we have some really exciting wholesale opportunities that are heading our way. I'm not going to share them at this moment because they're not yet done, but kind of that continued progress towards those dream retail and wholesale partners that, are coming our way and are they've taken some time and some cultivating, but that they're doing what they need to do. And we've seen
is almost here.
Yeah. Like we feel like we are definitely in an upward swing. And kind of some of the sacrifices and things we might have made getting to this point we are beginning to see some of the payoff on it. And I think our slow growth has taught us a lot. And so that has helped us make kind of the thoughtful decisions along the way. Yeah. So I think that's part of it. And I think the recognition and things that we're getting from individuals and our own consumers who still trust us as a brand and what we're doing and are giving us continued positive feedback on our newer products, on our existing products, and knowing that we have enough of a lifeline to kind of offer them an evolution of ourselves as a brand is also a win.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you teasing that there are big announcements coming up. So prime time for people to jump to the show notes and follow along so that as you announce whatever those partnerships and everything else that are coming, they can celebrate those wins with you as you go. I want to get into the business side of it a bit more because everyone listening, I'm sure, has used a bandage, has had a bug bite, has had a bump, a scrape, something like that. But not a lot of us have thought about like the business side of first aid and personal care. What would you say is the single biggest missed opportunity in the field?
I mean, I think the bandages are a big one. It's interesting. I saw, given everything that's happening in my community currently, there's been a lot of posts about what to keep in your go bag or first aid kits or things like that. And there was a woman who posted who was clearly very much about like clean, healthy, all the things. And she's listing all the things that she would keep in her first aid kit. And then she lists Band-Aid brand bandages with a link, an Amazon link to Band-Aid brand. And I thought it was so funny that she has all of these like the things that she eats and the things she uses to clean her house. And all these things are all like natural, organic, whatever. And then she's going for this big box brand that only recently clearly came out having contained microplastics and forever chemicals. And so it's like this blind spot that exists that, as the awareness grows of kind of the effect of these things on our bodies, it feels like it's an opportunity to be able to say, this is actually a really easy one. This isn't, it's not a different mechanism. It's not you're not using it differently, buying it differently, having to reapply it differently. It's literally the same thing, just better. And I think not having the learning curve of it feels like the easiest switch anybody could make. Yeah. And I think that's like part of, even with our Don't Scratch That Pen or our patches, it's about an easy switch. right? And I think that as somebody who is very aware of kind of the messages of what we should or shouldn't do, right? And especially a woman of a certain age, when we were talking about like perimenopause, and it's like, okay, great. So, you need to watch your sugar, but you need all the protein, but you need all the vitamins, but you need, like, there's so many things that we need to be doing at the same time. It's information overload and feels like, where do I even begin? Whereas this feels like such an easy thing to be able to do better. Again, progress on this. And so it feels like that's really an opportunity. And there's been plenty of brands that have, rebranded, repackaged bandages, whether it's because it has stars on it or superheroes or it's in a cute box or whatever. But going into the actual ingredients and what it's made of, the substance of it has not happened a lot. And making that accessible, both because it's available in a lot of places, but also that it's financially accessible for people. I think that's an opportunity that we're excited to be able to take and leverage and create a better solution for individuals.
Yeah. And like your bandages, just so folks know, aside from being tested and not having those forever chemicals, they're made of bamboo, they're compostable, they're latex free. So thinking about those different skin sensitivities, it makes me think about our skin in general. And you and All Better do a great job talking about how our skin is our largest organ and we don't really think about it unless it comes to beauty, right? There's all these thoughts about clean beauty, the right beauty, so much money spent on pursuit of anti-aging, a certain look, a certain performance of femininity. And there's so much of our skin that we're quite literally leaving untouched or unthought about in how we could treat it better. How do you feel like you sit in that intersection of you're working with skin, and oftentimes we're only thinking about how we look to other people? What is that experience like for you?
Well, the irony of it is that I mean, maybe it's not irony, maybe it's the reason, like, I'm not a big skincare, air quote, beauty, air quote person. So like, I do not have a 12-step skincare routine, or anything like that. I think of our skin, I probably should, maybe not 12, but like, I don't know, 3 or 4. I put sunscreen on, which reminds me, I don't think I did this morning, but generally I put sunscreen on. Generally, I wash my face with some kind of soap. I do not wear makeup on a daily basis, mostly because I don't want to have the energy. I generally don't have the patience to take it off properly at the end. But I think it's not just that our skin is our biggest organ, which it is, our largest organ. Our skin is what protects our body. It's like our armor from the elements and from what's kind of in the world in so many ways, that the only way it does that is when it's healthy and solid, right? So when you have like a scratch or, an eczema flare up or a cut or a bite, it's exposing, it's a break in your armor that is exposing you to potential harm. And so putting something on the break in your armor that is harmful in and of itself just feels so counterintuitive, right? So it's like, my daughter's a big Dungeons and Dragons person and is now a fencer. And we just came back from Italy, where there was a lot of talk of the Colosseum and battles and things, and thinking like, imagine like fixing your shield with a bullet, right? It's like, why would you do that? Right. So looking at what we use to repair that shield or to protect it as it repairs itself, which is like the miracle of our skin and our bodies in most cases, we want to do something that supports that process rather than potentially hinders that process. And so I think the beauty piece is, it's speaking to our own vanity, our own fear of aging, our own, dare I say, like patriarchal society of, generalized beauty standards, all of those things, which to each his own. I just think we have to do this part too. Right.
Yeah.
So like if that is where your focus is and that's a major priority for you, I would encourage you to think about the rest of you. Right. It's like those images that you see of older women now who were like diligent about putting sunscreen here, but then like forgot about their necks.
Right.
And their chest. And then you see like there's like a line of delineation, not just for the double chin like me, but for like where the skin is clearly, sunspots and wrinkled and all that because they didn't pay attention to the rest of themselves. Same is true for their hands and all that. It's like a perfect, even for the community, that beauty and the aesthetic component of their skin is the priority. It takes its toll over time.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the same is true for the rest of our body. And thinking about how do we keep it safe and keep it healthy for as long as we can and keep our armor kind of in place. A lot of older individuals you see who get cuts easily and things like that. That simple cut could lead to a really major problem later or not so much later. And so having things that they could put on that kind of support their body's ability to fix itself and therefore keep them in a good place for longer, like why would we not want to do that?
Right. And progress can be an easy switch, right? If there are thoughtful companies making and innovating with products and all of that. And also progress can mean thinking about things differently, thinking a bit more critically about what we're using and why, and where we might be overlooking some of those areas. So good. All right. Obviously, I agree with a lot of the things you're saying. I'm like, my wheels are turning. As founders, there are so many decisions you have to make on any given day, right? And such a variety of outcomes that those affect. Sometimes it is like, yeah, I'm going to just do a walk and talk for this meeting because I've got to run something to school. Or sometimes it's saying like, nope, I'm going to sign this contract for this manufacturer and commit to X financial investment. When was the last time you were wrong?
I think it's complicated because I think that we learn from all of these things. And I mean, there's definitely, when I think back, there's definitely things that we spent money on that we, in retrospect, did nothing for the business. And so, was that a bad use of money? In theory, yes. Was it the right choice at the time? Probably. Did we not know any better? Yeah. I think so. I have a tendency to do things very quickly, which is a good counter to Stacy's tendency to do everything very slowly. And so, every once in a while, I'll do something reactionary or too quickly, and then she'll kind of remind me of like, hey, let's try to like pump the brakes a little before we do that next time. Or
I'm guilty of the same thing. I heard this analogy about how different teams, there's like the pedals on a car. You've got your gas, your brake, and your clutch. And I am a gas person. I can sometimes be a clutch. Yeah. And if needed, I can pump the brakes, but I pump the brakes like a gas pedal. Like, there is no like, hello, we're going to stay on the brake and then let up and start coasting. No, if we're going to go, we're going to go. If we're going to stop, we're going to stop. And so I need those brake and clutch people to help balance me out. And they need my pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
To sometimes spur them out of what is it? Analysis paralysis or self-doubt or fill in the blank.
Fear. Just fear. I mean, I think that's part of it is thinking about, so we were having conversations about we have 2 new partnerships that are kind of in process right now. And in the process of kind of like negotiating and thinking about what we want them to look like and all that. And, they come back with stuff and then we have to sit and think about it and then we go back. But I think I say to my kids all the time, like, what's the worst that could happen? The worst is they say no. And So I think kind of sitting in that discomfort and asking for what you want or what you think is fair. And we got an answer for one. I'm waiting on the other. But in one case, the response was, yeah, that is fair. And it's a completely different thing. This is not necessarily something I've done wrong, but I think it's something that I've done that I've learned from my mistakes about is doing the gut check and not acting out of desperation. I think Stacey and I are both risk averse, and we both want to make decisions not out of fear. And we also want to follow the rules all the time. And those are not like in the history of what you look for in like a founder, entrepreneur, business person. Those are not what you look for, right? And so we've had to learn some of the things, such as like pursuing multiple things at the same time that might have a similar outcome, and being comfortable with pursuing all of those simultaneously in hopes that one of them pans out. Even though like our instinct is to be like, we need to pick one and we should just focus on that, right? Taking advantage of kind of all the opportunities if there isn't a cost associated with all of them. And then again, having faith that the right one will reveal itself. I mean, I'm doing that. So my daughter is in 8th grade. We're applying to high schools and trying to get into a public school. And the timelines are completely different.
Of course.
Schools are completely different, all of the things. And somebody's like, well, what do you want? And I said, I don't know. I said, but there's a part of me that has faith that the right answer will reveal itself. And so right now we are just pursuing all the opportunities that are available that make sense and not pursuing anything that doesn't make sense. And the same is true in the business. We had another partnership opportunity that we basically went back and said, listen, like, this isn't the right thing for us right now. We'd love to keep in touch and keep you up to date. And please, if you see us doing something that feels like a good opportunity for us to work together, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll reevaluate at the time. Just like we got to clear out the stuff that doesn't make sense. Just hold our breath and take the step and see what the outcome is and hope. And not just hope, but hope and do everything we can to make those things successful. But I think there have been so many mistakes that we've learned invaluable lessons from, that even the mistakes have value because they've taught us something that have allowed us to make a different decision or avoid a similar issue in the future. And so it's worth it.
What's really interesting is you've actually uncovered why I love this question so much, which it gets us thinking about how we think, how we frame, how we position an idea of right and wrong, and learning, and multiple ways to be right, and there being no one right path, and failure as a quick teacher, all of those kind of lessons. So kudos to you, because it took 18 episodes for somebody to find the not heavily hid, but to like realize that there's more hidden in that question than tell us about a mistake. Right.
Well, I think I had talked to you about it in the past, about the term I wanted to coin about a slingshot moment.
Tell us about that.
So this idea that if we look at mistakes or hardships not as a step back, but as a slingshot moment, this idea that when you are using a slingshot, as many of us do, I'm sure, in order for it to work, right, you have to pull it back for it to spring forward. And the farther back you pull, the faster it goes forward. And you have an opportunity when you have this step back, or what feels like a step backwards, to sit in that and just have it remain this like step back from your starting point, or you have an opportunity to use that as a momentum building moment to project yourself forward beyond your starting point. And that if you can figure out a way to gather everything that's happening in that experience, feel your feelings, very important, mourn your losses and acknowledge your mistakes, but then also gather all the useful information in order to build some kind of momentum that pushes you forward. It is no longer a mistake. It's just a slingshot moment that pushed you forward. And it's a term that I believe does not exist, but that I would love to trademark Goldman 2025. I would like to use more often. And I say that it's something that I talk to my kids about and say, like, listen, you can sit in it and you can feel all the sadness and frustration and anger that goes along with whatever this experience brought to you, but it will have been pointless if you didn't then feel those things and then get to the other side of, okay, now what? What did I learn? What am I going to do next? What am I not going to repeat? And it doesn't have to propel you so far forward that you don't even see your starting point. But as long as it creates this forward moving momentum, then it will have had a purpose.
It creates progress.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, you've heard it here, folks. This is what has been coined a slingshot moment. And I'm curious to hear what our listeners think and if they can name some slingshot moments in their life, because several are coming to mind for me with that analogy. And I will wax poetic on them later because I still have a bunch of more questions for you. And because we're talking about slingshots and you mentioned children and all of this, we all know that healthy founders build healthy businesses. And part of that is giving yourself space to fill your own cup in whatever way that in whatever format that takes. I'm curious, what does play look like for you?
Well, I just came back from a very long break, though that I was working while I was away traveling. So that was lovely. During that trip, I read 5 books, which was amazing. And I was really proud of myself because generally my general release or brain rest comes in the form of watching K-dramas. And
yes,
one would say I even have a problem with perhaps too much or my exclusive consumption of only Korean content. But so I was proud of myself that on this trip I didn't watch any K-dramas. However, I did return guns blazing and just enjoyed myself a series.
No such thing as a guilty pleasure for anybody.
Yeah, no, it doesn't.
Like what you like, we love it.
Yeah. So I think that's one thing, because generally that means I can't do anything else when I'm watching it because I have to read the subtitles. And so it really is like a total break and kind of an island in time for me.
Especially as a founder and a parent, multitasking is just how you get out of bed.
Yes, exactly. But I think the other thing is that I'm a crafter at heart. I like doing all kinds of things. I can sew, I can draw, I've painted before, I build things. And so I think kind of digging into something like that, is another way for me to have a bit of a break, a brain break, so to speak, as my kids like to say. And so that is definitely something I also enjoy. I don't do as much of it as I would like, but when I'm feeling inspired, I definitely get to do that. And my daughter's 14th birthday party is coming up soon. And so it gives me a reason to do a little bit of something as I prepare for her wicked sing-along in my house with a bunch of theater kids that's coming up. So everybody keep your distance from Encino on the 25th. It's going to be loud. Or join.
Pull up a long chair. If you were theater kids, sign me up. Maybe you can charge tickets.
Right? Just to watch. It's going to be.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I can't. Soundbite. Just a soundbite from that would just be so rich with like energy and
Teen angst.
and all of the things, and I'm here for it so much. But yeah, the idea of like finding outlets that give your different parts of your brain a break, that be immersive, and also being creative without having to monetize it or have a quote unquote like objective beyond being creative, I think is so fascinating. And it's definitely something I do. And in doing these interviews, like so many of the things people do to play is off of screens. Or if it is on a screen, it is fully immersed in a different world where we can't accidentally slip into just check one thing. Let me just refresh this dashboard, because I think as founders, we learn what a slippery slope that is. You can never just check everything. Like you have to, you have to cut yourself off and be self-disciplined in that to give yourself those breaks.
Well, I think also for me, at least the tinkering and the kind of creative outlet piece is also my favorite part of my work when I get to do that, since I'm the one who gets to focus a lot on product development. And then, so thinking about like the products themselves, creative use of the ingredients, the like packaging and delivery mechanisms, it's all part of that part of my brain that enjoys those pieces.
Well, because you start making these products, it's not like you're just going to some big white label warehouse and saying that, let's slap our branding on it. What looks cute? It's you are literally looking at ingredient lists. You're talking with chemists. Like you're saying like, oh, tea tree oil. What might that, we're using it in this way. What else could we, like, that's what product development means in your world, which I think for our friends that are in software, it's while some of the methodology and the thinking might be the same, the elements that you're working with are just so fundamentally different, which is another potential for creativity and problem solving.
Absolutely.
What's like one of your favorite like product innovations you've done that you're like, yeah, that was smart. Yep, I thought of that.
I mean, the pen, the Don't Scratch That pen and the lip gloss dispenser is definitely a good one.
For folks who haven't seen it, used it, an anti-itch cream inside of a lip gloss dispenser. Why does that make sense?
So the way I describe it as a mom specifically is what are the pain points of putting any kind of cream or ointment on a small child, right? So the first is if you have it in a tube, they want to put it on themselves and then they go ahead and squeeze the entire tube and all the contents are out and everywhere. Or they use too much for a small area, or they are complaining about a discomfort that you want to help them with. They're screaming about it and running away while simultaneously wanting help with it. And so you need to be able to hold them or a piece of their clothing with one hand, apply it really quickly to a targeted area, and then allow them to run in the hopes that you've gotten it to the spot that you need. And so having the pen that if a small child would like to apply it to themselves, first of all, they can hold it, squeeze it as much as they want. The contents are not going to come out. They get to do the clicking part that has a satisfying both kinesthetic and audio component to it. And then even the smallest hand can hold it and put it on the area that's a problem. But then also you're able to put it in your pocket, fanny pack, diaper bag, purse, and have it accessible and easy to bring with you. It's small enough to take with you, but not small enough to get lost necessarily as easily as something else might. And so it just...
As we're getting close to the end, you talked a bit about your favorite part of the job. What's one of the most challenging things in what you do?
I mean, right now I'm the one who's kind of responsible for like being the grown-up in the room when it comes to our finances. So keeping it organized, keeping a handle on the numbers and all that kind of stuff. And I'll say, though I have the ability to do it, I don't enjoy it. It's not my favorite. And it carries with it a certain level of responsibility, even though Stacey and I are both responsible for it. I feel like I have to be the primary one kind of holding us back on and wherever we net out financially feels like the burden of it falls more on me. And so that is something that I do not enjoy, begrudgingly do. I think, been doing pretty well. But it's definitely one of those things that I look forward to passing on to a trusted colleague one day soon so that I can focus more on the kind of creative product development stuff and kind of the bigger business growth piece of what it is that we're doing.
That's like one of the best parts about growing is like the pieces of the job that you've had to do because someone needed to do it and do it right. But it's
I didn't say I'm doing it right. I'm doing it. I'm hopeful that I'm doing it right. But, we'll see.
Founder.
Fingers crossed.
True founder. But like that idea that you can be like, great, we're approaching a growth point where, yay, we can celebrate raising X amount of money or X distribution or X in sales. You also get to celebrate and we get to hire somebody to do something that they love and are specialized in doing.
Yes.
And freeing up those founder resources for you to be able to operate more so in this big vision, in the product space, in your areas of excellence, I think is just like, I'm here for that. I am absolutely here for that. And we will drop a link below because there's a way that you can get involved in it. Merav and Stacey have always been very thoughtful about building with community and not on the backs or extracting from community. As you have heard, there's so much thought and care in how they're building this company, not just the products, not just the culture, but really the financial and all of the pieces that uphold a sustainable, profitable, impact-driven business. And they want others to come along for the ride too. So more to come on that as well. I want to zoom in on what is going to be the last big question.
All right, bring it.
I feel like it's a great place to end with you on. What's a hill you would die on?
The first thing that came to mind is business related in the idea of this is the way it's always been done. That response or that explanation for something drives me crazy. It makes me feel, it feels oppressive, right? Like we do it this way because this is the way it's always been done. And actually, like, I feel like we have consciously questioned that as we've built the business and saying, are we doing this because this feels like the right way to do it? Or because this is the way we've been told it's supposed to be done? And kind of gut checking ourselves on that. And then I've had that experience for myself personally, specifically when it comes to Judaism, actually, and this idea that certain holidays are celebrated certain ways. And I wanted to change something within our family and do something in a way that was more engaging and interactive, specifically for my young children. And the response I got from the older generation in the family was, well, but this is the way it's always been done. And this is how it goes. And the older person does it. And then all the younger ones are bored. And that's part of how it happens. And I remember my response to them being, how's that working for you? And was basically like, fuck that. Like, that's not the way I'm going to do it for my own children. Just because that's the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's right, doesn't mean it's the way it has to be done, and all of those things. And I feel the same way is true in the choices we make and the way we move forward with our business. The way it's always been done has been done that way because it's a system that was not created by us. Us being like literally us in like 2025, but also us as women. And I think this idea that the only way to be successful as women is to emulate what men have done up until now is just not true. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. It continues to be true because nobody's willing to do it differently. But I think more of us that lead and grow with heart and community and integrity in this way, the more we do it, the more likelihood that others will. And I talk to my kids about it all the time of like, sometimes you have to be the first or the second. Like, what's that? There's the thing that was done, the guy who was dancing at the festival. Do you know this video?
No. I immediately thought of the Andy Cohen dancing at the Grateful Dead concert, but I know that's not the video you're referencing.
There's a video of a person dancing at a music festival. And that person was dancing and they look strange because nobody else is dancing around them. And then like another person joins them and another person joins them. And then all of a sudden a big group of people join them. And what was done was that like a person dancing on their own is crazy and can be like written off as crazy. So the braver person is the second and third that join that person. And they're the ones that create the movement. And this idea that you need all of those to be able to create the movement. And I don't believe that we're the first, but I do believe that we're at the beginning of that, of being able to go in and say, I'm not going to go and find a bunch of old dudes to be the advisors for my business because those old dudes are going to get their old dude friends to give us money. And then we have to run the business like a bunch of old dudes. And I'm not interested. So I think that's the hill, the idea of like, this is how it's always been done. And just,
my response to that, I was always like, okay, so what? Like, yeah, what if we did it differently? It's like that curiosity and that innovation and that dissatisfaction with things that weren't built for everyone to succeed or even benefit from at the slightest. And at the worst, obviously oppressive and harmful. Like, I'm here for it. I love hearing how you have done that throughout, not just building this business, but your presence, your parenting, your relationship with Stacy, your co-founder, and we'll link to her episode. People want to get a double dose of the All Better Co crew. And just thank you. There are so many gems of wisdom in this. I think for people who are aspiring entrepreneurs, who are currently running a business, who also maybe just are consumers who want to know that there are people out there building differently with them in mind. You've been just like a wonderful beacon of, I'll say it, progress today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right. And where can people find you on the internet? Like if this is your time to plug what you'd like to plug, let people know where they can get in touch with you. If they're like, absolutely send me all your bandages.
Everything, all the things. Our website, allbetterco.com. And then social handles are all the same, which is Get All Better. Instagram, I think we're on the TikTok, as the young people say, Facebook, and then, so feel free to reach out.
Awesome. We will drop those links in the show notes. Everyone can get all better. And until next time.